Hey, everybody, and welcome to Talking Hockey Sense. My name is Chris Peters. It's episode 126 of the podcast, and we are very glad to have you with us today. But we've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, some of it very difficult, some of it exciting. But we are obviously, as the rest of the hockey world continues to, memorializing Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Gaudreau, the Gaudreau brothers who tragically lost their lives last week. Guys that I've covered their careers, and certainly have been familiar with them in that way from an on ice perspective. And I put a call out to some of our listeners to share some of their own memories, and then I'll also share a few of mine. I did post a column about the Gaudreau brothers on FloHockey. Just basically, talking about the different memories and why there's such, a feeling of remembrances of joy, of family, of all of those things. And we will talk about that a bit more. In terms of prospect stuff, I will answer some questions. We've got NHL prospect tournaments happening next week, if you can believe it. We will talk about that. We will preview those events. There are 30 of the 32 NHL teams will be participating in prospect events starting next weekend. So a lot to get to on that front. And also want to remind you, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the podcast. Also, make sure you are subscribed to FloHockey. The hockey season is basically underway. We've got junior hockey preseason going right now. The USHL's preseason will start up. The Fall Classic is just a few weeks away. Obviously, Atlantic Hockey America coming at the end or at the beginning of October, and also the ECHL and more coming in mid-October. So a lot to look forward to. Please do subscribe to FloHockey, because we're going to have just so much great stuff for you all season long. But we're going to talk a bit today about the Gaudreau brothers, and I want to talk a little bit, from a personal perspective, but I also wanted to get some of our listener perspective, and also some of the other things and the different tributes that we've seen in the last few weeks. Quite frankly, the last week, almost week, has been absolutely difficult and impossible to comprehend. Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew as well, two guys that were just absolutely beloved. I think you talk to a lot of people and they'll say one of those two guys is one of their favorite teammates. Johnny played in the USHL for the Dubuque Fighting Saints. Matthew played for the Omaha Lancers. They both came from New Jersey, where they are revered. And Johnny, of course, is one of the, really most famous Jersey-based hockey players. A guy that is certainly an icon in South Jersey. I think Matthew has such an inspiring story as well, reaching the AHL after, a lot of people had put doubts on him and said, oh, you're only going to BC because you're Johnny's brother. And I think the thing is that you don't get a pro contract. You don't get a pro contract like he did just because you're somebody's brother. You don't get called up to the AHL because you're somebody's brother. You have to prove it. And I think that Matthew, who was similarly sized to Johnny, a little bit bigger than Johnny, not nearly as skilled, but I mean, the fact that the work ethic and the ability to be a contributor on a very good Boston College team in his career, with really them only overlapping 1 year. I just think that, let's not forget about that. Played in the ECHL, played in the AHL after playing at Boston College, and certainly was deserving of that. And, I think for all of us, as we've talked about these guys and talked about, the things that we're going to remember, I think it comes back to family and, the touching tributes that we've seen, the messages from their family. Both Matthew and Johnny's wives have had some very beautiful posts on Instagram. And one of the things that I find most touching as an older brother and as a sibling, and certainly as somebody that's lost people close to you, the things that both wives said about how the brothers were together, it really hits you. It really does. The fact that they were together when they died so tragically, forever linked in life, and certainly as we move into this next phase, that hopefully, depending on what you believe, if there's an afterlife, if there's heaven, if there whatever it is, that they're wherever they are, they're together, and that they are doing what they loved. And so it's been really hard to wrap our heads around it. I mean, the players are pro athletes are so larger than life. The fact is, accidents, and in this case, a suspected drunk driving incident, these things happen far too frequently. They are certainly, hopefully there are lessons that will be coming from that, and that, you consider, if this hits home for you, that you consider your own choices and actions, where when it comes to drinking and driving. But I think really, to center it back to the two men that were lost, um, a constant theme, in addition to that family theme, the fact that, Johnny went to Columbus to be closer to his family, the fact that Matthew, when he was done playing, went and coached Gloucester Catholic High School, which is where Guy Gaudreau, their father, coached, and where Johnny went, and it was such an important part of their family, and he went to coach there. The other thing that comes up every time you hear about these guys, it's the laughter, it's the joy, it is the excitement, it is, the funny nature that they had, and the love that they gave to other people. And you'll hear some of that in some of the remembrances, and you'll see some of that. But you think about also their impact, and particularly Johnny, because he obviously reached the highest levels, became a star in the NHL. He was a guy that made a lot of people feel like, if a guy that is that small and that slight, and a guy who loved junk food and who didn't necessarily look the way an elite athlete is supposed to look, if that guy can make it, maybe I can too. I wrote this in my column, and I feel this way too, is that there's always the people that make it to the higher levels that are not typical in terms of whatever their size or maybe their strength or athleticism. There is something special, because with Johnny, it wasn't just work ethic. It was this preternatural skill. It was this ability to do things that just so few players can. So there's something innate in that. There's something difficult to describe. And we talk about development. We talk about prospects and how they grow and different things. And he was always a guy that bucked all of the ideas, because he was so special and magical. I mean, really one of the best puck handlers of his era, certainly one of the best of all time in the league, one of the most creative players that I tracked. And, I just think that the joy that we heard about came out in the way that he played, and in the way that Matthew played, and in the way that people around them reacted to them. I always said that Johnny Gaudreau was one of the most entertaining players I have ever tracked as a prospect. I've said that for a long time. You can go back to the United States of Hockey blog days, where I wrote about him. I think it was maybe during his Hobey Baker season, and just really amazed at kind of what he was doing, just every time he touched the puck. And that was really the thing that will continue to stand out to me, with Johnny, and all those years that we got to watch him. I mean, the fun that he had playing the sport, and it really came through. We're recording this on Wednesday, and there will be memorials in Columbus and Calgary. And if you haven't seen the photos, I'm sure you will, or you probably have. But to see the Saddle Dome, and this is a player that left Calgary. I think there were a lot of people that were very upset by it when he did leave, but this was a player that everyone knew how special it was that he was there, how special it was that he was a Flame, and also a guy who I think has, we'll probably hear in the not so distant future. I have a feeling we'll see number 13 hanging in the rafters in the Saddle Dome. I think we'll see it at Nationwide Arena as well in Columbus. I think that what he meant to Columbus, or to Calgary first, and then what he meant to Columbus, choosing Columbus when so many free agents did not, choosing Columbus when he had an opportunity either to return to Calgary where he had been comfortable, or to go to maybe somewhere even closer to home than Columbus. Was there an opportunity to go to another team? He's a lifelong Flyers fan. Would that have been a possibility for him? But he chose Columbus. And I think there were a lot of different things. There was a family aspect to it. I know one of his very close friends was Eric Robinson, who was there. I think, you think about that. Getting on the American side of the border was important because after COVID, being separate from your family, you're starting your own family, as he and his wife Meredith did. And so all of those things, he meant so much. And I think Zach Werenski said it in a press conference today that, it was special that Johnny Gaudreau chose Columbus and a player of his caliber. I just remember the shock when I heard that that's where he was going to go, because no one chose Columbus, but yet he did. And so when you see these memorials and vigils and everything else that will be coming out, it just goes to show you people didn't just love Johnny Gaudreau because he was a great hockey player. That's how people got to know him. That's how people saw him. That's how people will continue to remember him as a hockey player. But just look at the personal accounts from teammates, friends, family, former coaches, guys that he just happened to meet, people that he met, fans that he interacted with. This is a special person. And you hear the same things about Maddie, and you see the GoFundMe for Maddie's family, and his family, over $500,000 in just a matter of days raised for his unborn son and his wife. And you just think about the impact that those two had on the people that they came in contact with. It's pretty special. And that to me is the legacy that they leave. And I talked a little bit about how players like Johnny, that looked like him, didn't really have necessarily a realistic expectation to make it to the NHL. A lot of them are told, you're too small, you're not going to make it. Johnny Gaudreau was told that plenty of times in his career. And I think even I wrote that I wasn't sure that he was going to make it when the first time I saw him when he was at the Dubuque Fighting Saints. And I was like, gosh, this is special. This guy is special. There's no question he's special, but he's 5'7", 140 pounds. How many guys make it? And he did. And I wrote this as well in the column. When you're watching players, this is a lesson I learned very early on, thankfully, thanks to Johnny Gaudreau. You will know when you see that special quality. It's obvious in certain players. It might be how hard they compete. It might be the way they handle the puck. It might be the decisions that they make. It might be their speed. Johnny Gaudreau was this dynamo in a 5'7", 140 pound package against a team that the first time I ever saw him, he was playing against a team that had 4 future NHL defensemen and a number 1 NHL goalie on it. He had 3 points in the game, had a shootout goal, had an incredible overall impact in that game at his size, won Rookie of the Year that year, won the Clark Cup in the USHL with Dubuque. You cannot discount special, and he was special. Last night, my breath was basically taken away when I saw the post from Cole Caulfield on Instagram. And Cole Caulfield announced yesterday that he was changing his number to number 13 in honor of Johnny Gaudreau. Now, Cole, he wore number 13 in the past because he was inspired by Johnny Gaudreau. He put that post up, and the thing that struck me about that post was that, Cole, it's there's a whole thing with him. He was number 22, he goes to number 13, but he had the opportunity to play with Johnny Gaudreau at the most recent Men's World Championship. First time they've ever played on the same team together. And he talked about how badly he wanted to be around Johnny all the time, how much he wanted to just learn from him, and how he was inspired that Johnny Gaudreau paved the way essentially for players like him. And, you know, Cole Caulfield has heard all the doubts that Johnny Gaudreau had, but he was inspired. And Johnny Gaudreau was a guy that broke a lot of barriers. At least, you know, he's not the first small player to make it in the NHL, but I think there's a lot that he was that made him special just because of you know the slight build and all these different things. And just he looked like a child for most of his career. When he was on the World Junior team, they won gold medal. They were calling him little boy even after winning the gold medal. But, you know, looking at this, and I just want to read the last little bit that Cole Caulfield wrote in that post on Instagram. And you saw a little bit ago the picture, and just to let Cole's words say it, because this is really where, you know, I got choked up. He said, "The last few years playing as number 22 have been some of the best years of my life. It truly has been a dream come true, and I will forever hold those memories and that number close to me. I wore number 13 at a point in my career because of Johnny, and now I will be wearing it again to honor him. He paved the way for smaller players and proved that we had a future in the game at the highest level. I will forever be grateful to him for inspiring me and others. Rest in peace, Johnny Hockey." And you really can't say it better than Cole did right there. And, you know, Cole in number 13, when he was at the National Team Development Program, scored 72 goals, which is a record that I'm not sure will ever be broken at that program. 72 goals in one season, 14 goals in one under-18 tournament. And he also wore number 13 in 2 World Junior Championships, one of which he won gold at, just as Johnny Gaudreau had done. And I think, you know, Cole Caulfield is going to do Johnny Hockey quite proud this year. And, you know, I wanted to also, as I mentioned, let some of you who listen to this show talk about your own memories of Johnny. And I'm going to start with this one from Sam. And you know, Sam Wismer is you know, works in hockey media a bit here. And Sam writes, "I remember meeting Johnny at Checking for Charity at the Checking for Charity tournament 2 years ago. We struck up a conversation. He was the nicest guy and so excited for the tournament that weekend." And that's pretty common. You would hear, you know, he was very personable. He was always greeting people with a smile. I think, you know, he was just as happy to see other people as they were to see him. Because I don't think he ever thought of himself as a superstar, and I don't even think he ever thought of himself as an underdog. I just think he just loved the game so much, and that was all that mattered. This one comes to us from Drew, and Drew actually, you know, worked with the University of Michigan hockey team, and so he shared this. "We opened with Boston College in 2013-14 when JG was at the height of his powers in college hockey. In the lead up to that game at Yost, I can't think of a player who received more of a singular continued focus in pre-scout, a very healthy respect for a special player and person. Still had 1 assist in the game." And Johnny, of course, won the Hobie Baker, played 3 years at Boston College, won a national championship. And, you know, I remember when they ousted Denver from the national tournament as well. And Jim Montgomery, who had John at Dubuque, said, you know, they just basically got Johnny hockeyed essentially because Johnny Gaudreau was so good he could take over a game, and that's why teams had to focus so squarely on him, because he could take over a game even if you game plan for him perfectly. And you know, even that goes back to his freshman year, and so that is a really good one. And to think, when he was at Boston College, he had played on a line with Bill Arnold and Kevin Hayes. And I've been thinking a lot about Kevin Hayes in the last little bit here. It was one of the most dominant lines we've ever seen in college hockey. And Kevin Hayes, you know, has had some real personal tragedy, losing his brother Jimmy, who was just an absolute saint of a human, and losing one of his best friends in Johnny. And you know, my heart goes out to him as well, just because it's just too much. You know, you just wonder how it is, and like the price that we pay for these relationships that we build is that grief when they're gone. And I've thought a lot about Kevin Hayes as a result. So thank you, Drew, for sending in that memory. Hannah Stewart, prospect writer, was also just getting started in the Johnny hockey era. And she writes, I was already dipping a toe in, but Johnny's play at the 2013 World Juniors was a big part of why I got into prospect work. He's basically the prototype of that small skill guy I always gravitate to. So I've got a lot to be grateful to him for. I think Johnny did that for a lot of people. He defied what was normal. And those players that are outliers, they're really fun to watch and they're fun to track. And they're also fun to study because they are so different than the norm. And you try to figure out which of those small skill guys have that special quality. And Johnny certainly did have that. Our next one comes from Scott Kennedy. And this one, he says, my first memory of him was thinking, holy shit, I can't wait to see him and Kane together on a USA team going best on best. I'm still really upset that never happened. The greedy losers who run the NHL stole that opportunity from Gaudreau's generation. Did they ever? And, I think Johnny Hockey was Johnny Gaudreau was part of that Team North America at the 2016 World Cup of Hockey. He had the assist on the game-winning goal in that iconic moment, the only moment that I actually remember from that 2016 World Cup of Hockey, where he assisted on Nathan McKinnon's game-winning goal against Sweden when Team North America won. That to me is still the most fun I've ever had watching watching that Team North America play. It was an iconic group. And yeah, Johnny would have been in the mix for the Olympics. I think Team USA's wings were very loaded and it was going to be very, even as good as he was, it was going to be a fight. But to think, he was in the mix and had everything to play for. He's USA's all-time leading scorer at the Men's World Championship. Was there again last year or last spring. And quite frankly, it's just hard to believe that we don't have that time to watch him. But obviously that pales into comparison to the grief of his family, who I continue to think of, all the time right now. From when I heard Thursday night to really, I think for a long time, I'll think about how awful I feel for that family, how grateful I am that we had the opportunity to watch Johnny play, to watch Maddie play, to watch them grow together, and then also, become family men and other things. And it's going to be a long time, I think, for any of us to really get over this. And you don't really get over it, but it hurts pretty deep right now. And I just feel lucky that we've, existed at the same time as those two young men. And we existed at a time where we could watch them do what they did and grow. And we're obviously going to continue to think of the Gaudreau family. We're going to continue to think of their Johnny and Maddie's wives, their kids. Obviously the parents, Gia and Jane, the sisters, Kristen and Katie. Their families as well, their children. And the awful thing that it's awful to be reminded in this way, but I will say, in times of tragedy, you need community. And for all its differences and faults and the different people that come in and all these different things about hockey, the one thing that is always true is there is a community. We call it the hockey community, in a way that I don't think a lot of sports talk that way. I mean, I'm sure they do, but I just feel like in this situation, community is really what matters. And I think it's what has helped us get through. And I just think, I wish things were different. I wish we didn't have to have this kind of discussion, but I am grateful for the hockey community and for the way that I know that they will support and we will support the Gaudreau family. And, we will constantly be thinking of them and trying to provide strength and whatever we can for them. So we'll be thinking of all of you, and we're so grateful for your sons. All right. It's hard to transition. I thought about not doing more, but I do want to at least send out do what we usually do on this show, continue to talk about these players, and watch them grow and develop and become stars themselves. And next week we'll have a great opportunity to see that. It's hard to believe that we're already into prospect tournament time. NHL training camps will open in a few weeks, but before that, there's rookie camp. And rookie camp is going to bring a combination of players, obviously the drafted and signed players, guys that are invites and tryouts, and it's a great opportunity to see the future of an organization. And with that comes rookie tournaments. And starting on Friday, September 13th, there will be rookie tournaments happening across North America. 30 of the 32 NHL teams will have teams involved. Only the New York Islanders and Washington Capitals are not participating in any rookie events. But there are going to be a ton of games going on. So I'm just going to run down for you what to look out for. I have a full piece on FloHockey right now with every schedule of every prospect tournament. So go check that out. We're still waiting on streaming information. Most teams tend to post their games on YouTube or on their team website. I know a few teams are doing audio only. A few teams are doing regional games as well. Would love for someday, for some way, for NHL to get all of these games in one place, because there is absolutely an appetite for the prospect tournaments. They're often not in NHL buildings, so I'm sure there's quality control and different things you want to do to get everything right. But it is a great showcase of the future of the game. And you look at the rosters: Max Celebrini, Will Smith, they are on San Jose's roster. You're going to be getting guys that are like, with Colorado, Callum Ritchie under contract now, getting ready to go. Will Easton Cowan, put a step forward for Toronto. David Reinbacher, Lane Hudson expected to play for Montreal. So a lot of guys that we're excited to see. But here's where everybody's playing. So in Montreal, you're going to have Toronto and the Canadiens playing, just those two teams there, 2 games for those teams. Over in Buffalo, this has become one of the better prospect events on the calendar. Boston, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, New Jersey, Ottawa, Columbus will have teams in Buffalo the 13th through the 15th. Out in Penticton, which has been traditionally another one of those places, you have the Western Canadian teams: Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, Edmonton, playing in games. There will also be a Penticton V's versus Salmon Arms Silverbacks game. It is a preseason game for the BCHL. That game actually will be on FloHockey, so you can watch the Penticton V's and the Salmon Arms Silverbacks during the Penticton tournament. A great opportunity for those players to play in front of a lot of NHL personnel. In Nashville, we'll have the Predators hosting Florida, Carolina, and Tampa Bay. They will be playing in that event. In St. Louis, the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase, which is in honor of Tom Curvers, the late Minnesota Wild assistant GM. It is typically included at least St. Louis, Minnesota, and Chicago. That will be the case once again. Each of those teams will play each other once. So that will be in Maryland Heights at the Blues practice facility right there just outside St. Louis. In El Segundo, it'll be the Rookie Face-Off, which is the biggest of the events. Excuse me. Los Angeles Kings, Vegas Golden Knights, Colorado Avalanche, Anaheim Ducks, Utah Hockey Club, Seattle, and San Jose will also be there. So a lot of eyes on that one. However, I read that San Jose is doing an audio only feed, which is a little surprising. So we'll see if actually Celebrini ends up playing there. Out in Traverse City, we're going to have just Detroit and Dallas. Traverse City for many, many years was the hub of prospect tournaments. We did not have this proliferation of prospect tournaments that we have now. Typically you get, 6-7 teams out there, or 6-ish teams out into Traverse City, Michigan, where the Red Wings traditionally host their training camp. This year, it'll just be Detroit and Dallas, 2 games as those 2 teams play each other. There will also be a rookie series in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Flyers will play the New York Rangers prospects. So a lot of teams involved, and there are a lot of top prospects that will be involved as well. I'll certainly be keeping a close eye on all of them. as I'm able to, because I do think they're interesting. And, you know, we have our regular listener Q&A with a bunch of prospect questions, and we'll get to those in just a second. But, you know, the other thing I wanted to say is, what do you watch for when you watch one of these prospect tournaments? I've been to a few of them. I've watched many of the games. I have yet to go to one and come away with any opinion different than what I already had of those players coming into it. I think prospect tournaments can be a little deceiving. You're going to see guys that are a little bit older that can probably do a little bit more. You're going to see some of these more recent draft picks maybe struggle a little bit with the pace. They're getting out, you know, kind of getting their feet wet a little bit. None of them have ever played a pro game before. This moves a bit faster. They are entertaining. They are exciting. I just don't know if there's a ton that you can read into it. And that's going to bring me to our listener Q&A, because that's really what our first question is about. And so we're going to our Q&A now. And our first question comes from Charlie. And Charlie says, is there anything you watch for or get out of these prospect tourneys or showcases, or are they mostly just for fans? Well, they are for fans for sure, but they're much more for the player development people, for the NHL general managers, for the coaching staff as well. It's a primer and a preparation for training camp. All of these players, not all of them, many of the players that play in these prospect tournaments are also going to be involved in the NHL team's NHL training camp. Now, they have big rosters. They might get a couple of NHL preseason games. There are a lot of different things that kind of go into that. But it is a valuable thing for that purpose. It allows the players to get their feet wet. I think it gives the coaching staff an opportunity to say, we need to get this guy a few more looks. We need to get a guy that can go in and let's get him in one of our preseason games based on what we saw in that. For me as a prospect analyst and for you as a fan watching, I don't think there's anything that you can really learn that's different than you already knew. If nothing else, I mean, like, let's put it this way. You look at the players that played their draft season. So a guy that is coming off of his draft season, let's just use Macklin Celebrini as the example, the number one pick. You know, he goes through his regular season. For some of those guys, it starts in the Holinka Gretzky Cup. He didn't play in that last year, but he goes through the whole season. Then he goes to the combine. Then he goes to the draft. Then he goes to rookie camp. Then there's a couple weeks off. Then you're back at it. You know, then you start captain skates, whatever else. And then within, you know, basically a month, you are getting ready for your first NHL season. So it's very difficult for those players. You know, you think about different guys, Tija Ginla, others, you know, Jet Luchenko, whoever it might be. It's hard for those guys to ramp it back up. But they will, and they have to. They really have no choice. And that's why I think a lot of these guys might not perform as well as some of the more veteran players, guys that played in the AHL last season, guys that played a little bit of pro hockey or had a taste of it. There will be some guys like Brant Clark is on Los Angeles's roster. He's played in NHL games, you know, so they're a lot of teams are putting guys through the paces and getting them ready for camp and seeing what they can bring. So it is mostly for fans, but I you know, just to see these players, to get them in their jerseys, to you know, get content, whatever else you want to do as an NHL team. But they're very valuable for that player development staff. There are things that they're going to be able to see. There are going to be things that they can talk about. There are going to be things that need to be improved, all those different things. And then it also gives that player a good head start on training camp, so that if they are, like, let's say Easton Cowan, who did not go to London's training camp, he's like, I'm putting all my eggs in the NHL basket right now. You know, if I get cut, I'll go back to London, but I'll have gone through an NHL training camp. You know, that's a player where if he has a strong camp, all of a sudden a strong rookie tournament, strong camp, you know, all of a sudden you have to start having that conversation about should he be on the roster. So very, very interesting dynamic that we have with rookie tournaments, but that should be a fun one to track. And we'll certainly be keeping a close eye on all of these players in this next couple of weeks here. It's one of the most fun things about it. So we will keep a close eye on that. All right, next question comes to us from Maxwell, and Maxwell says, the longer you do this, do you find yourself valuing floor or ceiling more? How does that compare when you first got into scouting? Ooh, that is a really good question. I think that there are basically there's no right way to go about it. I think the thing is that um I do definitely pay more attention to the floor of a player now than I did before. I think when you do what I do, where I'm not making the choices for a team, you can take kind of some of those swings on upside because it's not a multi-million dollar decision. It's basically you are allowed to have a little bit of, take a swing without a lot of risk. I still very much value upside, and I think a lot of NHL teams do as well. I think that they are definitely uh they look for stars. A lot of teams look for stars, and you say, well, you look at different players that get drafted. You'll see this a lot. They're saying, okay, I don't think this guy has tremendous hockey sense, but he's got a great athletic profile. He's 6'4" and still growing. He skates well enough. He has a physical edge to him. You say, I believe he's going to get better. And so you say, okay, well, I'm that player's, a lot of times though, if like, let's say it's hockey sense is the deficient area, that's typically where I think that upside is harder for that player to obtain. If that's something they don't have at a younger age, much harder to develop it and get it later. And so if you are drafting an athletic toolkit as opposed to, you know, the way a player is supposed to think, that makes it a little more challenging. So I still very much value that athletic toolkit, but if there's also some hockey sense, but there's deficiencies, maybe they're not moving pucks as quickly as they need to, maybe they're not, they don't have great hands, maybe they're not as offensively adept. Those are some of the things that I think will continue to be kind of um, things that you can overlook, whereas hockey sense maybe not so much. So I still think that the upside, you look at my work over the years, I think guys like, Keandre Miller is a guy where it was very much based on upside, less on production. Same thing with EJ Emery this year. I think you could go the other way. Like one of the players that I really thought had big time upside, and because of the athletic toolkit and some of the other things that they had, and the size and the strength, Siron Noel was a guy I had as a first round candidate, never played in the NHL, so like that happens too, is that it can go both ways. I think you look at guys like Riley Tufte. Tufte was a major upside pick. It's athletic profile. But again, I think that was another one where he was definitely physically able to play in the NHL, but I just don't think he ever processed the game at the NHL speed to become a regular. So there are so many examples. It could go either way. I always prefer to look at the ceiling rather than the floor, because if the floor, this guy's got a high floor, well, does that mean he's basically only going to get incrementally better from here? And are we okay with him being, this is what he's going to be? I'd rather take the bet on upside. And it's why, I think guys like Artem Levshinov for me last year was very high. Why Beckett Seneca went as high as he did. There are teams that are still making that bet on upside, and I think they'll continue to. All right. Our next question comes from Bleeding Teal. Who is your dark horse among the rookies to make a significant impact for their team this season? That is a great question. Very difficult to know. I mean, like, I think it all kind of comes down to what role certain guys end up playing. Since you're Bleeding Teal, one of the guys that I'm going to be very interested to see is, does Yaroslav Askarov make the Sharks out of camp? Does he get significant enough playing time? And if he does, is the team in front of him going to be able to help him enough for him to not have a disastrous rookie season? That's a question that I think will have to be answered. And I think it's also incumbent on the Sharks to make sure they're making the right decision for Askarov, who obviously wants to be in the NHL, but maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense for him at this time. Another guy that I'm going to keep an eye on this year, just in terms of what's going to happen with him. I talked about him a little bit earlier. Easton Cowan. He had a great season in the CHL last year. He's a guy that I think is, overperformed what I thought he was going to do in that first season. It was a pick that I was critical of at the time, but having watched his game, the versatility that he has, his ability to score, that's a player that I could absolutely see making an impact at that next level. And then also, I don't necessarily think that he'd be a Calder Trophy candidate, but he is a player that I think will be interesting. Now, here's another one. I'm looking at two guys in Montreal, and I'm looking at David Reinbacher, and I'm looking at Lane Hudson. Lane Hudson got some NHL time last year. Reinbacher played a bit in the AHL. I think that likely Reinbacher is going to spend some more time in the AHL. He is the much higher drafted player, but I do look at Lane Hudson as the guy that could potentially make their NHL team and make an impact significant enough to at least, be termed as an impact rookie. I do think that that's not going to be a shock to anybody. They know that I think Lane Hudson is an exceptional young player. But that's one where I'm just like, you got two guys with two different draft profiles, two different size profiles, two different long-term projections. And yet I just think that Hudson has that opportunity to be a more significant player. There's a lot of guys, though, that are going to be pushing for spots on teams. You look at which of the young guys for Chicago beyond Connor Bedard is going to be able to make the team, make an impact. Is Frank Nazar going to be that guy? Is Artem Levshinov going to make it out of camp? There are a lot of different things like that. High profile guys, Cutter Gauthier, how much of an impact is he able to make for the Ducks right away? Is he on the everyday roster at that time? Is Olin Zellweger going to play more? There are just a lot of questions to be asked. So I know it's not a great answer, not a specific answer in terms of the dark horse that among the rookies to make a significant impact for their team. But, I do think that those are some of the guys that are in that conversation that can make it happen. I think all eyes are going to be on Celebrini and Will Smith in San Jose. How are they going to, mesh, and are they both going to play? There's just so many questions to be answered. So excited to find out this season. All right, up next, we've got King Clarkey, and King Clarkey asks, where do you expect Rutger McGroarty to start the season, and where do you expect him to be by the end of the season? Great question, and I think a lot of people are curious about that too. It's my thought, based on everything I've heard, Rutger McGroarty is going to get a significant opportunity to make the Penguins out of camp, and probably does make the Penguins out of camp. I think that he has the chance to play on one of their top lines. Now, he is a very smart hockey player. I think that there is going to be a pace adjustment for him. He's not a great skater, but he thinks the game very well. He plays with tenacity. He's got some toughness. I think that he'll give the Penguins a chance. I also think it's possible, if not likely, that he will spend at least a little bit of time in the AHL. But I don't think it would be more than a little while. I think that he has that capability. Maybe he starts in the NHL, gets a little confidence in the AHL, gets called up closer to the end of the season, gets right back into it. I think he'll be a Penguin at the end of the year as well. So McGroarty is going to be one to watch. I know a lot of people are very curious as to what he's going to look like on that Penguins lineup. Is there a spot they need to have a guy on an entry-level deal make an impact for them? It doesn't happen very often in Pittsburgh. He's got to be one of those guys. I think he can be. It is going to be interesting. I personally felt if he went back to school last year or this year, it would have been fine. Obviously, the trade happens. The situation presents itself. As long as Pittsburgh can put Rutger McGroarty in a position to be successful as a rookie, he should be a Penguin. If not, don't be scared to send him to Wilkes-Barre. And I think that'll be something that is strongly considered. All right, our next question comes from Andrew. Or actually, it looks like I skipped one. Andrew asks, what does Jet Luchenko have to do to make Team Canada? Does he have the support around him to produce as much as he needs to, or would he have to perform like a top 3 pick and carry the team by himself to have a chance? Actually, I think as far as, and that appeared on the screen a second ago, and I apologize I messed up my producer there on going out of order here, but Sorry about that, Nikki. But we have, with Luchenko, he's going to be, I think he's going to be very much in the mix for Canada. I don't think he has to do anything special outside of play the way that he's capable of. He is an incredibly fast skater. He is an incredibly diligent worker. I think he could play on their fourth line. He could play on their second line. He could play in a lot of different places. I don't think he has to produce at an especially high level. I don't think he has to do any of that stuff. All he has to do is play the way that he's capable of. At the World Junior Camp, he was outstanding. He was one of the best young players in that camp. He's still very young. I think he's got the versatility to make an impact for that team. So I don't think it'll be point-based. I don't think that I'd be worried about Guelph or anything like that in terms of their competitiveness. All I'm worried about is, does he play fast? Does he play physical? Does he get his chances? Does he produce enough? And does he, put defenders on their heels? Is he good on the forecheck? Those are all the things that Canada is going to be looking at for him to make their roster. All right, our final question from the Q&A comes from our pal Hockey Night. And Hockey Night is a Blackhawks fan, so I believe this is a Blackhawks related question. Who's the guy you feel can really raise his stock with a good camp? Well, Chicago's got a lot of young guys. I think the guy that needs to have a good camp if he's going to make the roster right away is Frank Nazar. I love the way that he came into the team at the end of the last season. He looked good. He looked like he belonged. It's just a matter of him finding a role. The Blackhawks brought in a lot of guys in free agency. They have NHL caliber players to play along Connor Bedard. You got to find a way to fit into a role. I think Frank Nazar long-term is a middle six player for that team, and that's a good thing. I mean, I think he's going to be able to be an impact middle sixer for them. I like the way that he plays. I think the pace is good. I think that he has a great work ethic, good defensive sense. He's got a great shot. So there's a lot of things that he can do. I think that's one guy that really does need to step it up and if he's going to make the NHL roster and prove himself in camp. So that's one I'll keep an eye on as we get going. Well, thanks everybody for the questions. That was the final question there, and I apologize for getting out of order there. But aside from that, I'm really excited about these prospect tournaments. I think it's always a great way to set the stage for the season. It's a great way to set the stage for training camps. But hey, hockey season, it might almost be here, but for FloHockey, it already is here. Over the last few weeks, we've been airing a lot of preseason junior hockey. A lot of leagues throughout Canada have already begun their preseason schedules. We've seen a lot of preseason tournaments. Starting this week, the USHL will open their preseason. So make sure you are ready for that. It is exciting to have junior hockey back, and it's very exciting to go into year 3 on FloHockey with the USHL. Looking forward to tracking all the draft prospects in that circuit, just as we do every year. They are starting their preseason this week. The Fall Classic will be September 18th through the 22nd, I believe, or at least through the 21st. I think I'm leaving on the 22nd, but I will be there. FloHockey will be there. We are going to have a lot of great content for you coming from the USHL Fall Classic this year, and a lot of stuff that we'll be bringing to you later in the season. Also, CJHL, you think about all the different leagues that make up the CJHL, they're getting rolling. They are starting their preseason. They'll have their regular season right here on FloHockey. The BCHL, the USPHL, NCDC, Premier, and Elite in the USPHL. You've got the SPHL, the ECHL, a lot of different leagues coming your way right on FloHockey, and we've got more coming very soon in terms of announcements and different things that we're going to be doing this year. We're growing our vertical, and we're really hopeful that you guys will stick around. We're also, we've talked about it a bit last week. I'll continue to tease it. There will be some changes coming to the podcast very soon, hopefully for the better for you. I think that one thing is I don't need to be talking to myself anymore, so we'll have some new stuff coming along there. That is still in the works. We're getting that all finalized. Very excited about that. We will have college hockey coverage this year. Atlantic Hockey America is on FloHockey, both men's and women's. You'll be able to see a lot of those games, including a great opener, Air Force against Arizona State. We can't wait for that one to see how that one goes along. It's going to be a good one on October 4th there as the college season begins. And, we're going to be getting ourselves ready for the season. There's a lot of exciting things along the way. Make sure you stay tuned to FloHockey next week for something big. I can't tell you what it is right now as I cough. It's so big I choked on the words. But anyway, we've got a lot coming your way on FloHockey. And so there has never been a better time to grab that annual subscription. You pay the fee up front. You get all that for a discounted rate compared to what the monthly fee would cost. I highly recommend it. If you are a hockey fan, it is something you have to have. We've got all those leagues. We've got all that data as well. That you can find right on our site. We will also have exclusive coverage and analysis on a number of new leagues and different things that we're going to be doing. So I cannot wait for the rest of the season. We started this podcast off on a sad note, and certainly we will continue to feel that with our friends in Columbus and Calgary and the Gaudreau family. But I think that the good news is hockey is almost here. A chance for us to celebrate the way that we always do, a chance for us to celebrate the game that we love, to play, to watch, to analyze the game that we all love so much. And hopefully that'll bring comfort, solace, and certainly, an ability to remember the great Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Gaudreau. And again, our hearts go out to their family. I want to say thank you to everybody who sent in questions, remembrances, much more. Want to thank Nikki for producing today. Want to thank all of you guys for supporting this show for as long as you have. It is my honor to continue to have these conversations with you on a fairly regular basis, and really looking forward to ramping things up as we get closer and closer to hockey season. So make sure you stay tuned for a ton of great coverage on FloHockey over the next few weeks. We'll be talking about those NHL prospect tournaments, the USHL season, the college hockey season. It's all right in front of us, and we can't wait for it. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Talking Hockey Sense. My name is Chris Peters. We'll catch you next time.